one of the fundamental problems that the debate around a voice to Parliament getting off the ground is the absolute belief that in this country we spend an awful lot of money and time and focus on symbols, but we don't put time and focus and energy into the reality of what happens for kids on the ground. Now, it's great that people go to Garma and they say we need to change the world for all the different reasons, but the absolute reality is that we want to live in a country where a kid born in Tennant Creek in Housing Commission could one day grow up to be Prime Minister, just like the Housing Commission bloke who was able to become Prime Minister from Sydney. Now, we want that to be the case, but you and I both know that the odds of that are a lot more difficult for kids in the Northern Territory than the boy from Marrickville. But priorities is what's important here. Because we know that this government wants a voice to Parliament and they want that to happen as early as next year. So much so that in the federal budget there was $75 million for this national conversation about what to do with our constitution and what symbolism and who gets to speak on the behalf of the Indigenous community. But you know that there is one politician who hates this idea because she's focused totally about Tennant Creek. She's from Alice Springs. She's about what's happening on the ground versus what might eventually happen in Canberra. And of course, it's our dear friend, Senator Price. Well, one of your jobs when you're a senator is that you do these things called Senate estimates, where basically anyone employed by the government or who runs a government agency comes before you and you get to ask them questions they have to answer. Now, often this can sort of devolve into silly politics, and I'll show you some of that a bit later, but sometimes it really exposes the flaws in our system. And the National Children's Commissioner, a lady by the name of Anne Hollins, who I think used to be at Relationships Australia a few years ago, she was sitting opposite the Senator, and the Senator asked her some very direct questions. Remember, the lady's job is the National Children's Commissioner, and there's $75 million for The Voice. This is a woman who works for the current federal government and the former as well. And have a listen to how Senator Price shows the flaw in the system.
Unfortunately, the way that this role is funded, there is very limited capacity to deal with this or indeed many of the other issues that are affecting children and young people, particularly First Nations kids. For example, the disproportionate number of kids are removed from their families or who enter the youth justice system.
So the National Children's Commissioner has openly admitted that she doesn't have the funds to do the work to take care of our most vulnerable children in remote Australia. Again, more of the interaction between the Senator and the Commissioner.
Does the Commission recognise, prioritise the human rights of a child to live a life free of violence and sexual abuse over the right for the child to live within its culture, even if that culture is dysfunctional and unable to uphold the human rights of a child?
Again, a very complex question, Senator, and what I've been trying to do, and I have visited some remote communities in the short time I've been in this role, and am working with, for example, the Northern Territory government on trying to assist them. Then I think we need to really look at how are we ensuring that kids are able to be kept safe and well within their families and communities with the right level of support around them. And currently those supports are not fit for purpose.
Now, this went on for minutes and minutes and minutes. Now, let's be very clear. I have no problem with the Commissioner per se. I don't believe that she is anything other than a good-hearted, focused woman trying to achieve the right thing. But it's about the priorities of government. They had $75 million for the debate about The Voice. They did not have $75 million for the Children's Commissioner to be able to resource her office to be able to answer questions better than this.
Would the Commission agree that Indigenous children are being left in circumstances that are dysfunctional, that are leading to further traumatisation because of sexual abuse based on the fact that those children are Indigenous and largely authorities are concerned with being regarded racist for removing those children?
I think you're asking me to give an opinion on something that I have not been able to investigate. So I don't have the facts to hand on this matter, but there are royal commissions, there's many royal commissions that have been held and many inquiries that certainly have expressed concerns about the safety of First Nations children.
Jacinta Price, in one Senate estimates hearing, has already achieved more than most politicians and more than Lydia Thorpe will ever achieve in the federal parliament. You see, one of the great joys of our system is that the bureaucracy at some level has to be held accountable to the people who we elect, the people who ask them the difficult questions and you get to see the difficult answers. Now, as a result of that exchange, does the world change? Only if the media pays attention to what they've just seen. The fact that right now is probably the first time you have even heard about this exchange, despite the fact that the media has known about it all day long, tells you everything about the attention that the media seeks to place on this issue. Their obsession is about the debate about the voice, yes or no. My obsession is about the kids that are represented by that fantastic senator from the Northern Territory. And if we've got $75 million for a debate about better representation, why don't we also find $75 million for a better protection of the kids who are currently in the tough circumstances, to make sure that one day they are able to do exactly what Senator Price has done, stood for office and make an impact. But also about priorities. The Children's Commissioner doesn't have the money to answer the questions that you've just said, but there is extra money for a brand new office that has never existed before in Australia under this government. According to Linda Burney, very proudly announcing after the federal budget that there's $2 million to take an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspective and experiences to the world. We will invest $2 million to establish an ambassador for First Nations people who will have what to say about their capacity to talk about the situation involving too many children for too long in this country. It's all about sending people to conferences. It's all about everyone being able to have big speeches and thump their chest, as opposed to actually being a shield for the kids who need it the most.